Welcome to Rock the Vote Leadership Question Time. So tonight's session, I wish to talk about money and what effects on us, our policies, and the way forward. So yes, it's the economy, stupid. And so I'd like to talk about tax, spending, debt, assets, and finances in general. So where does the government get its money from? Clue, it's mainly from us. Where does it spend its money? On our behalf. I said, how much do we owe and what do we own? So the first question about tax, where does the government get its money from? Well, it's mainly from us in various forms of taxation. So it divides in the year 23 to 24. It divides from income tax, so that's $58.9 billion, and that's billion with a B. So that's over half the tax revenue that the government gets is from income tax. And as somebody said, it's interesting that because we tax alcohol to stop people drinking and we tax smoking to stop people smoking. So why do we tax income? So the next big chunk is GST at 29.2. And goods and services tax applies to all sorts of things, probably far more things than it should do. There's corporation tax, and that's at 18.7, and various other taxes. So the total tax revenue is $115.4 billion, which sounds an awful lot of money, and you'd think we'd be thinking rich, really, until you see the next bit. Where does it spend its money? So this is how it breaks down. Unfortunately, if you remember the previous number, it's a lot smaller than this number, the $139 billion that the government is spending on our behalf. And the biggest ticket, of course, is social security and welfare, $44.5 billion. Health comes in at second at 30 billion, and education and government core service and so on. Defense is a measly $3 billion. And then you've got transport, various industrial services, and then all sorts of things about housing, community development, and so on. It's another $7.5 billion. The finance cost at the bottom, that's nearly $9 billion. And that is debt interest. And at our meeting at the Beehive, the Prime Minister said, yeah, I just signed a check for $9 billion. Yeah, what could that buy? Yeah, well, debt is a choice, and we've chosen to be in this debt. And it's what do you do about it? Do you hang on to this debt? Because if you keep spending the way you're spending and the income isn't going up, you're going to accrue more debt and therefore more interest. There is a theory that when your interest payments exceed your defense budget, then you're unlikely to stay a solvent country for much longer. And you can see there that our interest costs are nearly 3 times what we spend on defence. Where does it spend it? Well, if you've got very good eyes, you can see all the portfolios that the current government has. Lots and lots and lots. Tier 1 departments, and then Tier 2 portfolios with ministers. And that spider's web connecting them all. So I would like to simplify it such that you have a reduced number of portfolios which amalgamate lots of the ministries we've had before. It's just an idea, but this could form the basis for our policy working groups that we divide it in these areas under each of the portfolios and so on. Now, what everybody
so how many ministerial portfolios were there, Andrew?
They're recommended, this is from the New Zealand Institute, there are recommended 20 portfolios, and I've got it down to 15 because I've excluded the Prime Minister and I've amalgamated a couple. So I think we need 15 representatives to develop policies in each of those areas. So I'll list, I can probably show it again.
I can see 20 on the screen there, or 19.
Yeah. This is the 20 portfolios that are recommended by the New Zealand Institute.
Yeah.
I've taken that list of 20 and knocked it down to 15 because I think some of them can be amalgamated. And yeah, it kind of makes sense to bring things together as well. And then I've just excluded the Prime Minister's portfolio. That's separate as well. So that's kind of the running of the Prime Minister's office. We don't really need a policy on that. So what do we or the government owe? A remarkable amount, actually, and a lot of people don't know this. So the gross government debt is $175.5 billion as of 2025. That's around 45% of GDP. For New Zealand, that's high, and that's one of the highest figures it's been for a long time. There was a period of time when New Zealand was running a surplus. Happy days. But it seems to be growing in debt, and hence the interest will be growing.
Well, I heard just a couple of days ago, it's doubled in size in the last 5 years, the debt.
Well, I've got the full table. So one of the nice things about trawling around the internet, you can pull down the data for the last 20 or 30 years. And I've compiled that into a spreadsheet, and I can bore you silly with all those details if you really want. But there's been debt for many, many years. And it's just grown and grown and grown. Of course, it grew like topsy during COVID. The downside, of course, is some income has gone down, particularly from tourism as well. So what do we owe? What do we own rather than what do we owe? So we've seen what we owe, but what do we own as a country? So it's remarkable that, did you know that your household has a stake in government assets worth around $275,000? It's a bit like owning a luxury car, but you've got no say in how it's used or how well it's looked after. Here's the catch. The government has borrowed heavily to buy these assets. And the interest payments alone are eating up nearly 4 cents of every tax dollar you pay. But wait, it gets more interesting. The financial returns from these assets don't even cover the borrowing costs. So why does the government own so many things? Do they really need to own all these assets? Could some of them serve New Zealanders better in private hands? And when I go down the list, you might agree or disagree as to what should be in private hands and what should be in public hands. So you can think, well, some are essential services that only the government could do, but others maybe it'd be better in private hands. So the grand total is $571 billion in assets as of 2024. Of this, property, plant and equipment are about 283. So the biggest chunk is in property, plant and equipment. So that would include the buildings for schools and hospitals and so on. But there are other financial assets it has, about 257 billion. So that might include a KiwiSaver and superannuation, maybe. And there's other assets of about 30 billion. So your superannuation fund, which is a major government investment fund, has assets of around $75 to $70 billion. So this is just the list of the state-owned enterprises. So there's a few of them you'd say, yeah, that's got to be done by the government, but other ones, you're really sure? How about, does the government really need to run airlines? Does it need to run a post office or KiwiRail and so on, or other railways? So those in terms of assets are worth 30 or nearly 31 billion. And there's mixed ownership. It tops up to, so the government has got a stake in some of it, tops up to 38 billion. And that includes a lot of energy companies. And so if they're profitable companies and operated well, wouldn't it be better to sell them off? There are crown entities. Now, some of them are running at a loss. Surprise, surprise, Kianga Ora is making an operating loss of 568 million, but it's got assets potentially of 30 billion, sorry, in there. And there's all sorts of other things, like the New Zealand Blood and Organ Institute. It owns New Zealand Lotteries and Pharmaceutical Management Agency and so on. So there's a few which you could think, maybe they could be better in private hands. Why does it need to run television? That's the first thing to go, I would say. And so the grand total of Crown entities is 283 billion.
Propaganda channel.
Propaganda, indeed. So finally, how much money is there sloshing around New Zealand? So I asked it to tot up. How much money is floating around New Zealand in financial transactions? So it's not just the government, it's what does everybody else spend? And that would be the basis of taxation. So a little hint is it at card transactions pops up at 36 billion. But companies reported a total income of 980 billion. Yeah, that's only scraping the surface, really. The total aggregate value of all card payments is 102 billion. And so if you look at the higher value settlements that go through Reserve Bank and the exchange settlement accounts system, you could project an annualized volume in the order of $12 trillion. And that is 12 with 12 zeros on the end of it. That is a bucket load of money in there. So that could be the basis of your economy and your basis of your taxation system, rather than looking at sales tax, income tax, corporation tax, and so on. So there's some notes about those transactions. So combining the settlement volume to get to the 12 trillion number suggests that a total annualized transaction is very large, likely in trillions of dollars. What we're doing there is converting daily amounts into annualized amounts. And so there could be some discrepancies here. So I stand to be corrected in all these numbers. Okay. Yeah. So that's the notes again for the modeling of the economy in terms of financial transactions. And the reason I'm doing that is because I think one of the simplest way of getting rid of the amount of debt we've got is by instituting a financial transaction tax. If you think about it, if you've got a $12 trillion economy, or $12 trillion worth of transactions every year, you could potentially get, well, let's say 120 billion from a 1% or 240 billion from a 2% levy. And that will more than cover your spending and pay off your national debts.
Something like a transaction tax could work if every country or like the banking standard approved it, so that there's nowhere that the banks could hide. Because the problem is they can always just make up ways to kind of hide it or to make up new derivatives to try and kind of avoid it.
Is there a financial transaction involved in that? A derivative is a financial transaction. If you're buying it, selling it, there's a transaction there.
Yeah, they can make up something else. I mean, a lot of gambling places just make up things, and some might they make like credit or something.
I've been looking at the financial transaction tax for quite a long time, and in fact, there's been lots of interest in it, and for exactly the reasons that you've pointed out, Andrew. It has been mooted at put forward at a much lower rate than you're suggesting, and I think because it's not like GST, it's accumulative, so it accumulates through the environment, if you want. So because you're not hauling it back again. So GST, I'll pay GST, but then I'll haul it back. So a financial transaction tax doesn't do that. So set at a very low amount, more closer to what Damon was suggesting, like the 0.01 or even like 0.1. The main I see it as a positive, and the reason I see it as a positive is because the bankers hate it, and anything bankers hate has got to be good, because the bankers are the people who run the world at the moment, and they don't want anyone to know they run the world, so they make sure that everyone else looks like they're the ones doing nefarious things, and the bankers are the good people. They hate it and they fight it every step of the way. So if you're going to put it as a policy, then you have to word it very carefully. I personally think it's a good idea. And the reason is that your main income is coming from banking transactions and the overseas transactions. The problem is the coming and going of money, and I see it as a Pigouvian tax, which I just put into the chat. The Pigouvian tax is a tax on negative activities that you're trying to slow down. So you're trying to reduce that negative activity. And a financial transaction tax does that, because most of the money that's going at a high level, those millions and millions and millions of dollars of transactions, is where you make your money on a financial transaction tax. And that's why the banking system doesn't want you to do that, because none of that is taxed at the moment. So it slows down that hot money, which is actually so disastrous for our economy. Like, it does nothing good for us. So I see it as a Pigouvian tax, which will only benefit us, but you'll be fighting the big guys the whole way on that. The coming in from a slightly different angle, and that's looking at the fact that tax actually isn't what runs the country. Taxing us as a income tax, actually that money is destroyed. It's not going to pay for schools and stuff like that. It's literally taking money out of the economy for no reason, because the government is actually making the money, and it makes the money by making the money and then giving it to the banking sector and then borrowing it back off them. I did try and get Ian Parker to come to this meeting tonight, and I'm actually really disappointed that he hasn't replied to me and isn't on, because he would be able to explain this to you in a really structured way. And I'll link you up to him, Michael, Andrew, whoever wants to talk to him. And he explains how New Zealand used what
was his name?
Ian Parker.
Ian Parker. Okay.
So New Zealand used to, back in the olden days, we used to run our country on a system, but it only but the banks didn't like it very much. The central banks, Bank of England, and basically took it off us. And my suggestion is that's what we go back to. But I think a financial transaction tax is a really good go-between, because people really struggle with this idea that because we've been told that tax is how we run the country, and that's the price we pay for a civilized society, blah, blah, blah. It's actually not even true. But I don't have the time to explain it to you in this space. But I think someone who really understands it well should be the next person you talk to really kind of solidify how powerful a good financial policy is, and getting that foundation right. And if enough Kiwis understand how we've been hoodwinked on the banking system and the taxation system and all of that. So I'd really love it if you guys could connect with him and have a meeting.
Okay, great. And what about your party? Have you connected with him as well, your party?
Yeah, I connect with him on a personal level.
Yes.
And the probably the people that I've dealt with the most is the Positive Money New Zealand. And I can highly recommend you have a chat to them too. And they've kind of pulled back from a real gung-ho policy to let's just use government funding for infrastructure. zero interest funding for infrastructure. And because they just hit so many roadblocks, you know, because as soon as you, like what you're talking about, Andrew, you will find in the next 5 seconds is you will hit a roadblock and you'll be going nowhere. I know, because I've been here for 20 years, you know, and so we have to do this like in a way that it's almost not underhand, but you know, grassroots background, because this is how we did it in the 1930s. It was totally grassroots, and then it just boom, it was in place. And the Bank of England didn't see it coming, I don't think. So it has to be like, I don't know, I'm not the expert, but how, like I said, how Positive Money NZ has decided to engage with Parliament and government is by saying, let's just use government money, like basically tax-free money to fund our infrastructure. And then that would take the pressure off all of us funding infrastructure through our tax. But next level is what Ian Parker is talking about, where you actually, the government funds everything through its own mechanisms. Because just remember, so you think about, you know, where money comes from. You know, if you just go, well, where does money come from? It's a construct. So
it's made up.
Yeah, like you get it. Yeah.
We're living in a fiat currency, and we have been for many years.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with fiat currency.
Well, except it can be devalued, and
but that's because of the banking system. It's devalued because the banks are creating 0.0000 whatever.
Yeah, they're able to do it because
it's not a government problem, it's a banking problem. The government is allowing the banks to do that. It's not the private banking sector's job to make money, it's the government's job to make money. Well, if the government makes the money properly, it doesn't cause inflation.
Oh no. When governments make money, it always causes inflation.
No,
always.
It's the private banking sector that's causing the problems
now.
Okay, well, maybe because I'm obviously, you know, I'm not going to change your mind on this, but you know, if we could talk to an expert, then maybe that would help. No, okay, that's fine. Yeah. I just needed to say that, and I'll mute myself now. Thank you.
Good to talk.
Milton Friedman basically said that always inflation is a monetary issue, and if you let go of the money supply, if you allow the printing press to keep going, inflation is the inevitable consequence. So you're increasing the supply of money, it devalues itself. And because you've got a fiat currency system, it's easy to devalue it. It's easy to print more because there's nothing behind it. All that's behind it is a promise. And so the government is issuing debt. It's issuing IOUs.
The government doesn't need to issue debt. The government can literally make the right amount of money to run the country.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. That's because it's giving the money to the banking system at interest. No, it is giving the money to the banking system that gives it back to the government at interest. That system is wrong.
Yeah.
Milton Friedman was wrong on a number of issues. So he has been shown up as being incorrect on a number of issues.
But I think on inflation, I think he's right. I don't agree with everything he'd said, but I think he's right on inflation in there. And we've seen it. The governments around the world have been printing money, and surprise, we've got inflation.
Okay, the government is not printing enough money for us. It's printing it for the banking sector. The banking sector is the problem because they are controlling the government, and then the government is giving the banking sector money.
It makes little difference, Tracy. It makes a little difference because they're in bed with each other.
Yes, they are. But if you can cut off that in bed with each other and run the government for the people, which is what we all want, instead of for the private banking sector.
You could have a private banking sector. Yeah.
You can have a private banking sector, but they do not control the money supply, which is what they're doing at the moment.
The thing that I've wondered is, when Treasury came out in August and said that against their advice that Jacinda Ardern and Grant Robertson borrowed or printed $66 billion, and only 18% of that was anything to do with COVID. So it's about $11-12 billion. What I've not seen is what happened to the other $54 billion. What happened to it? What it just disappeared. What was it spent on?
So the point of the financial transaction tax being set at either 1% or 2%, it means you could abolish every other tax.
You could abolish every other tax at 0.1%. A friend of mine did the data years ago, and you could literally abolish every other tax at such a low rate, because you are putting a tax on the millions and millions of dollars of transaction that are happening on the daily, like at those high levels that are not being seen in the figures, I suspect, that you've given us. So there is a lot of money going through the system.
Yeah. Well, on the ones that people are admitting to, that's $12 trillion a year on there. So I'm basing it on the $12 trillion.
Yeah.
So if we try to trace things that are not declared, then you're not going to get the tax.
No, it's not that they're not declared. It's just that then they're not in the system because they're not being taxed. That's speculative money. That's stocks and shares and money going offshore and money coming onshore, things like that. So
those are all financial transactions.
Yeah, they are. And if they're taxed, you only need to tax at the smallest amount. Did you ever see that Bill Nighy clip on the financial transaction tax? Have you seen that one?
No.
I'll find it. I'll find it and flick it through to you.
Yes, please.
It's because it's funny, because he's a funny guy, and I'll see if I can find it on YouTube. I'll have a quick look. But yeah, we don't need. Remember back in Muldoon's day, I mean, the government went into the people were told to freak out because he was $8 million in debt. Put the government $8 million in debt. That was the beginning of our debt in New Zealand. We didn't have any debt before then. And everyone was like, "Oh my God, $8 million!" He lost the election based on $8 million worth of debt. I went to a meeting quite a few years ago, with the Doctors Association, and they were freaking out because it was costing, the health system was costing $9 billion a year, and it was going to go up. And what did the figures you have? You were up to, I can't remember what it was, but I remember thinking, shit, I was at this meeting 10 years ago and they were freaked out about their $9 billion bloody costings and worried about how they were going to manage that. And where are we now? It's costing triple
30
that.
billion. So yeah, health is 30 billion.
Yeah.
Triple that.
Yeah, so it wasn't long ago that it was 9, and the medical system was freaking out. So God knows.
I see.
I went to talk to them about using holistic natural healthcare, and that would keep their costs down, but they weren't interested.
No, of course not.
I see. Claire has put a question there. One of you could answer it, possibly. I can't.
What was the NZ system? What did the system that NZ used to use? Can you explain?
Oh, it was essentially social credit, the social credit system, which was put forward by Douglas, C.H. Douglas, 1930s. He talked about how the monetary system can't possibly work, because if you're in a factory producing gadgets and you need to be paid a certain amount of money, you know, to produce those gadgets, but you can't afford to buy those gadgets. So at some point, the government has to inject money into the economy so that everyone can afford to buy gadgets and share resources, you know, which is basically what money was invented for, was an ability for us to exchange. And so he said the government has to, oh shivers, I'm running out of juice. The government has to inject money into the economy. And so New Zealand was in the middle of the Great Depression, and they said, actually, we've got a solution for this, and it's social credit. And so in the 1930s, New Zealand was the first country to come out of the Great Depression. They were completely, we basically went from an incredibly impoverished state. If you look at the history of New Zealand, people, it was not good. You know, it was just like England, you know, like if you weren't working, you were dying. Like there was nothing for you, and no social welfare, nothing. So basically they printed equivalent of $10 billion, I think, in today's money, and they built roads, they built public buildings, they built schools, hospitals. So with the idea in mind that everyone had a warm, dry house. So all of this happened in a handful of years until it was shut down by the Bank of England, essentially. Not allowed to do that. Michael Joseph Savage died. John Lee was removed from office. And I actually believe New Zealand ran on that state until we were taken over by the corporates in 1986. So that's why we were one of the wealthiest countries in the world, because our government funded infrastructure through its own system. So the thing is that when you, let's say, Andrew, you talked about the government shouldn't be making money because they can't do that. But if you make the right amount of money, let's say, to build a road, build a bridge, build a hospital, then that is your asset. And the value of the asset is the money that you put into it. So the money is still there. The value, the wealth is there. But the money has gone into paying people, and they've gone on to pay people and do what they need to do. So it's actually a very powerful thing for the government to create the right amount of money for the right assets. And that's what we did back in the 1930s. And that's how we got out of the Great Depression faster than any other country in the world. So that's coming up 100 years now. It's like we've forgotten the technology. You know, we can't go back to the moon. But the legislation is still there.
But
none of that legislation has been removed.
And now New Zealand's probably going to be the first country to head straight back into a Great Depression.
Yeah.
Well, there's literally no reason we have to. It's only because of people like John Key and his, you know, he was obviously placed, you know, at the time. People like John Key and, you know, Jacinda and all those other psychopaths. Yeah, it's because we've been sold out.
Yeah, I think the system you're talking about is known as Keynesianism, as in Maynard Keynes.
No, it's C.H. Douglas. It was called social credit. We had a social credit party here in New Zealand for 60 years. It's only just become defunct. For whatever reason, it's a bit sad. No, nothing to do with Keynesianism. It's just called social credit. I'll have to pull out his book. Oh, she wasn't. Can't see this because I had to plug my computer in, and I'm here in the middle of in the darkness. So it's C.H. Douglas.
Do you trust the government to spend money wisely now?
Oh, I trust them more than the banking system. I don't trust the banking system.
Well, the ANZ today just came out making record profits once again, announcing it.
Yeah, so proud of themselves. Okay, I'll just pop this into the chat just to have a look at it. Like, I am not the expert. I mean, all I've done is just been looking at this for years and years and years. I was involved in social credit for years. I was looking at the monetary, monetary policy, positive money, NZ. There are people who are way smarter at this than I am. And it would just be really nice to get you in touch and have those conversations.
I pretty much harbor no love for the banks. Even today, I just found out that the cryptocurrency Discord, the main place for cryptocurrencies, banned banking transactions for peer-to-peer, just because the banks in New Zealand hate cryptocurrency so much. So I have no love for the banks. I suppose when we're designing policy, we have to look at what the reaction is going to be as well. Like if you have a financial transaction tax, like a 1%, 0.1% or whatnot, you have to also look at how banks will react, how hedge funds will react, and how our exchange rate will be affected. So that I'm wondering if the guys that have done that analysis, have they actually looked at how banks would respond, how companies would respond, and so forth?
So I have thought about this a little bit, Damon, and that is that it literally doesn't matter how they respond, because they are not increasing wealth. So they might increase money, but money is not wealth, as Andrew's pointed out. It's like you can make as much money as you like, but it's so what happens is people put money into, let's say, stocks and shares and derivatives and this and that. That is not creating wealth. What is creating wealth is people making chocolate and cars and fixing stuff. And so wealth creation is, even like a building or, pumping petrol out of the ground. So wealth, the stocks and shares and bonds and that is taking money out of the real economy and out of the wealth economy and putting it up here, where it's not actually doing any good. So the idea is then to invest money into things that have value, like real value.
You mean productivity?
Oh, okay, let's call it that. I don't believe in productivity for productivity's sake, because you can be very productive and do a lot of harm in your productive state. So if you're going to create something of value, that is wealth. Money is just like Andrew said, it's a concept.
It's a means of exchange.
It's a method of exchange, and we've turned it into a commodity, and it was never designed to be a commodity.
But to play the devil's advocate, if you are invested in shares and stocks and so on, then you're actually investing in companies that make things. So these bars of chocolate or these buildings don't come out of thin air. They need financial backing, and that's where your stocks and shares come from, and your leveraged banking comes from. So all the infrastructure is built on debt. All the companies are built on debt as well.
I don't think they have to be. I think the problem is, the way I see it, is debt drives environmental damage. Because the thing is, as soon as you take on a debt, you have to increase your productivity to cover the debt. And so you have to make far more than you actually need just to pay the banks back. So in fact, you have to make more and sell more and drive this consumer economy just to pay your debt. And I think there's and obviously you guys do too, there's a much better way of doing it that doesn't involve a debt-driven productivity that's actually harmful. So let's look at, let's say chocolate was a good example, actually. So we imagine that, you know, Whitakers or whatever go to Ghana, buy their chocolate, bring it back to New Zealand, turn it into chocolate, cocoa, turn it into chocolate. But there's a whole market, there's the derivatives, and there's a this and a that. And so cocoa beans aren't just sold between you and me. They're sold in a market, and then that obviously someone's got to make money. There's a middleman, and there's a whole market around cocoa. So that will drive an increase in costs as opposed to me just going and buying my cocoa beans from Africa somewhere. So none of that increases value. It just increases cost.
On contraire, it does. If you move a product from one area to another, you're increasing its value. If you process a product, you're increasing
if we went and
value.
bought it if we bought it in Africa, it would be, 10 cents a kilo.
Yeah.
But by the time we get it to New Zealand, it's $10 a kilo.
Yeah.
But that's not increased its value, that's increased its cost.
No, you've increased its price. It's obviously more valuable in New Zealand than it is in Ghana.
Yeah.
So if
having a middleman doesn't make anything better. Having stocks and shares involved in the commodity of cocoa beans doesn't make chocolate cheaper for us here in New Zealand.
No, but it makes it available. See, if you didn't have your debt, if you didn't have your middlemen, you wouldn't have chocolate. Because you're not going to go to Ghana and get the cocoa beans.
No, but Whitakers will, so that's okay.
Right. So how do they get these cocoa beans to New Zealand?
On a ship.
Who owns the ship?
Well, I tell you what, the big shipping companies who
shipping companies, they're middlemen. It's all part of the logistics.
The shipping the shipping companies are the shipper. They're transit. They're not the middleman.
Yeah. So they're adding value along that route. You're transporting something from one area where it's of low value to a higher value area.
I think we're getting off the topic of wealth creation.
But I think you're missing the point about debt and stocks and shares, and that they're the mechanism for generating wealth, because you're allowing them to invest where they otherwise couldn't do. So without your debt, you wouldn't have chocolate.
Okay, so there's a lot of what they call hot money. So hot money is where, the banking sector is making, like Michael said, millions, billions of dollars off the back of us trying to pay our mortgage, let's say, and credit card debt and whatever else. So they will decide to invest in, I don't know, something in India. So they go, okay, we're investing in silicon chips in India, and we're going to create, we're going to go to this town and we're going to make silicon chips or whatever, fluoride toothpaste, I don't know. And they pour all this hot money into that area. And then after a few years, everyone's, coming up in the world and they're making money. And then they're like, oh my God, we're poisoning our environment with whatever compound you're making. We're going to make some rules around company behavior that you can't poison our environment anymore. And the hot money goes, oh, stuff you, we're going to China where they don't have any rules around, or Vietnam or whatever. And so this hot money is actually incredibly damaging to the environment and to the economy, because when they lift up their money from all these factories and whatever they've made in India, then they're leaving that area completely devastated. And then they're moving it to somewhere else. So we have to be very careful about these massive multinational corporations that have so much power and control. I mean, we can't disagree.
We can't disagree, Tracy. We can disagree.
Oh, sorry, we can't disagree that is a bad thing.
We can disagree that the driving force is this hot money that you talk about, and everything is run by big corporations. It's not. The vast majority of companies are small businesses.
in New Zealand, the vast number of companies that run New Zealand, that pay tax in New Zealand, are small and medium enterprises. Yes, absolutely. They are not the problem. They are not the problem. And we should be supporting them as much as possible.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, the whole idea of a financial transaction tax most people will kind of just go on as normal, and what will happen is that there'll be less of the kind of bullshit transactions that occur. Like, you know how you've got financial risk management ones that are kind of after basis points, and there'll be less of those. So and that's fair. It's just when we're forecasting the revenue from it and the changes to the exchange rate, we have to take all that into account. So they are bullshit transactions, but they're still transactions. So a 0.01% transaction tax, I probably would be comfortable starting with that.
It's not going to raise enough money. It really isn't. Because the intention is to replace all the other taxes. So the principle should be that there's 4 major legs of a good taxation system. It's got to be fair to all citizens. It's got to be easy to collect. It's got to be predictable, and it must not negatively affect the economy. So many of the taxes that are in the country at the moment are negatively affecting how businesses operate and how people work and spend their money.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that the forecasts of the revenue you're going to get from 1%, I don't think it's going to be as high as you think they are.
Right.
Are you saying that, Damon, also, I think you said before that if it's too high, the banks will pull out of New Zealand?
Well, banks and firms, they're not going to do the same thing like as before, which is what on the paper that New Zealand Loyal referenced was that massive forecast, because they assumed that banks would do the same thing and that they would be doing the same thing. But it's not the case, because banks, well, I mean, like how GST functions is it's on just goods we buy. And yeah, the difference between the financial transaction tax and GST is that the transaction tax goes after the banks, basically.
Well, it goes after everyone, and it goes after everyone fairly. And so your high volumes will be in your high volume markets, which will be banks and financial institutions. But one other thrust is you grow the economy, and you grow the number of companies here. So if you reduce your corporation tax to 0, how many companies are going to relocate to New Zealand and set their headquarters here just for tax purposes, as happened in Ireland?
I've always had the idea, but it's just an idea of making our own banks. Well, making our own bank, because all of these banks are like for profit. Why shouldn't we just make our own?
Well, there used to be building societies. It's a mutual, so you can have mutual societies, which effectively do banking. But they need a banking license to do that. So a lot of building societies demutualized in the 80s and 90s and turned themselves into banks. And leverage debt even more.
I think this transaction tax, I mean, I'm not the maths guy, but it does sound fantastic. If it does eliminate every other tax and it's fair, meets all, I mean, the only thing you'd be up against is what Tracy indicated before would be the big banks.
Yeah, the banks would be against it. Of course they would. Yeah. But the majority of the population would be for it, because you're reducing their tax burden. And so we can see some, this is aimed at reducing inequality as well. It's a very simple, very fair way of taxation. So everybody pays effectively the same amount of tax, or the same percentage of tax, rather than at the moment the tax burden is skewed upon the people who really can't afford it, the poor, particularly when you've got 15% and GST.
I have a question. I've been lying on the couch listening because I haven't been very well.
Yeah.
But no. I think, was it you, Tracy, that was just saying this, or, or was it Damon, making our own bank? Wasn't that what President Kennedy was shot for? Wasn't it that he had notified everyone that in a week's time he was going to be separating from the banking system and setting up their own one? Anybody else know about that?
I've not heard that. He was shot for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, I know.
That's not one of the theories I've heard.
Yeah. Well, anyway, he had announced it the week before that he was going to. I mean, I know so little about it. I don't even know which system he was going to withdraw America out of and just begin doing their own banking, like printing their own money, what have you. Yeah, but anyway, I'll obviously no one's got an answer for that, and maybe it wasn't. I need more facts.
Well, America was still in the Bretton Woods system at the time, so it's still notionally the dollar was backed by gold. When Kennedy was president, you had to wait until Richard Nixon came along to break the Bretton Woods agreements, and then have basically introducing fiat currency around the world.
I'm not sure if I've got it quite right, Catherine, but I think the Abraham Lincoln was essentially assassinated by the banking system because he wanted to print what were called Lincoln greenbacks based on the wealth of the American people.
Okay, it was Lincoln rather than Kennedy, do you think?
Yeah, so he was definitely trying to step out from under the banking system.
Yeah.
It didn't go well for him, as we know.
No. Yeah, that is where I've twisted the story. Yeah. And this is the challenge of it, isn't it? That we're talking with some big shot dealers, aren't we, at this level, who aren't going to just say, yeah, take all our money, we don't mind.
We're not taking all their money. And it's not their money they're playing with either. That's the issue. The banks don't have any money. They're using other people's money.
Yeah, but they're boss of it, aren't they?
Yeah. Same with the government. The government doesn't have any money. It just uses other people's money. And eventually you run out of other people's money to play with.
Governments can't run out of money.
Well, in this
they're not like a household. They actually, it is their job. Their only, actually, some could argue their only job is actually to make a method of exchange so that we can run our country.
No. That's again, it's a modern invention.
Money is a modern invention, yes.
Yeah, the idea that the government should be printing money and the government should be in charge of monetary policy, the 20th century invention largely. And it's not really the role of the government to do that, but they've taken that on. And hence inflation has gone up. The money supply has expanded.
The money supply has expanded because the private banking sector is creating money. The government making money is not the issue. Them making it and then giving it to the banks to then lend it back off them, that is an issue. But the private banking sector is what is driving inflation and the cost of housing. And I mean, talk to Steve Keen if you want like a serious economic download. Check out Steve Keen. I can send you the links for him. He's way too brainy for me, but he will explain to you exactly how that system works, how that works and why. Because he's a professor of economics at the London School of Economics, I think, and he explains it in a way that you would probably understand. I really struggle with it because it's too highbrow for me. But he would answer your questions. Yeah,
they're making money out of nothing. It comes ex nihilo from thin air.
It's absolutely it's a travesty. Oh, well,
And
like
the
that we
result of
agree
that-
on.
Yeah, the result of that is that the money you have is worth less and less. So we can see other assets are growing. Look at the price of gold and silver and Bitcoin and compare that to the New Zealand dollar. It's not that gold, silver, and Bitcoin are increasing in value. It's just the New Zealand dollar is going down in value. So
No, silver and gold are definitely going up in value. Definitely. But it's been driven because people don't trust. They don't trust the dollar. They don't
Yeah.
trust their governments.
it's going up compared to the New Zealand dollar, but basically the New Zealand dollar is going down in value compared to gold and silver. The same amount of gold has bought the same thing for about 2,000 years. Proposed policy document for economics, just a one-pager, basically setting out the principles. It's free exchange, basically. Individuals should be free to exchange in a voluntary manner with one another without interference from the government, except to enforce property rights. So as we see it, the main role of the government is to ensure and enforce and protect property rights of the individuals. So these are principles of maximal economic freedom. And this is central to our approach. As they help ensure that the individuals have autonomy to make their own economic decisions and keep the fruits of their labour. And so we want to reduce or remove unnecessary bureaucratic obstacles and regulations that hinder economic activity. And if you think about it, how many things do you need a license for to do that you never used to need a license for? How many things do you need permission from the government, either national or local, to do that you never used to? And there. So your economic activity, your productivity, your production really should be able to be flexible and change according to your customers' needs. And so our economic policy wants to encourage the independence of citizens from the government. So it shouldn't be, individuals should not be reliant on the government support or intervention for their economic well-being. You set them free, they can be prosperous. So set them free to pursue their own goals and ambitions and to benefit when they work hard and use their ingenuity. We want to remove the barriers to entry into the market. So many regulations that are in New Zealand and other places are really closed shops. It's a way of enforcing a barrier to entry for competitors. And often they've been put in by the big market players to ensure that they don't have any competition. So it means that individuals and businesses should not face undue obstacles to starting or expanding their economic activities, i.e. starting a business or entering a market, and should be able to compete on an economic playing field with a level playing field. So this goes hand in hand with freedom of association, movement and choice. And this will back up the economic policy. So they should be able to associate with or disassociate with however they feel and move freely within the geographical locations, making their own choices. So the economic policy should aim at maximising individual autonomy and prosperity through minimal government intervention and promote a free and open market that encourages competition, innovation, and voluntary exchanges between individuals and businesses. Let's see, I'll start with 10. Stop sharing. Any comments on that? I'm very quiet.
Oh, well, you might lead the comments then, Andrew.
I might lead the comments. Well, it's a start for 10, as it were. It's the basis of the economic policy. It's basically free market economics. People should be able to do business without infringement or hindrance from the government. There's too many things that are in the way. And if you've ever tried to build an extension, you'll find out.
I mean, I really don't want to tax people, that's like we have to work out what we have to tax and, well, what we need, such as defense, for example, such as infrastructure, and then trying, well, we're going to pay our debts off, and then just kind of trying to get what we need. And then I would like to slowly reduce the tax burden as much as possible, really, you know.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, part of that is reducing the size of the government. Does government really need to be so big? You start with, do you really need 120 MPs to start? Does the the biggest employer in New Zealand is the government, the New Zealand government, and the various state bodies that are behind the government. And similarly in Auckland, the biggest employer in Auckland is the Auckland Council. Does this seem right? Does this seem sustainable? It's like an economy where you're taking each other's washing. At some point, it's going to fall apart because all you're doing is mounting up more and more debt. As you've seen from the figures I've just presented, that the debt is growing. It's not going down. You're spending more than you're bringing in. And that, as long as you're spending more than you're bringing in, your debt is always going to be rising. And the burden of that is always going to be rising, which means the bankers are always going to have leverage over you. So if you get rid of the debt, they've got, and international bodies have less leverage over you. Tracy, unmute yourself.
Who are we in debt to?
That's a good question. The honest answer is nobody really knows. Because when the government gets debt, what it does is issues IOUs. And so the various IOUs, but most of them are called bonds or treasury bonds. And the bankers buy them. And the bonds are basically interest bearing. So I promise to pay you, the bearer of this bond, a certain amount of money plus interest. So it's effectively guaranteed. So as long as the country survives, as long as the government survives, or a government of New Zealand survives, then you've got a guaranteed income. And that's why financial institutes like government debt, because it's a very, very low risk. And the interest that is charged upon it is based upon interbank loaning rates, and usually in the long term. So the IOUs can be 5 or 10 years long. So you're predicting what's happening. And the basis of a government is basically saying, I'm borrowing because I know I'm going to be richer in the future. That's the same with a household. I'm borrowing now because I know I'll be able to pay it off in the future because my income is going to go up and I can pay it off. Without mortgages, very few people will be able to buy a house. Without government debt, you couldn't embark on major infrastructure projects. So that's one side of it. But then the financial institutes then monetize those debts, those bonds, and sell them off to other financial institutes. And what they do then is you have pension funds. So if you've got a pension fund, you're probably one of the stakeholders in that debt. So in a sense, who do we owe this debt to? Kind of everybody and nobody, because it's always a promise for the long term. And one of the issues is debt and capitalism and a growing economy has always been dependent on a growing population, that you've always got the next generation of taxpayers to pay off your debts. Unfortunately, that's not happening because the population is shrinking.
So what do you see? What do you see the problem with debt-free money? What's your problem with so instead of the government creating bonds and turning it into interest-bearing debt, what do you see as the problem with the government creating its own debt-free money?
Because it's worth nothing. Ultimately, it goes to nothing if you keep creating this. Because
hang on. So why, if they have IOUs with the banks, then why do we need the middleman?
I mean, it's a good question. If you nationalize the banks or a central bank, you could print your own money.
So we used to do that, and we were one of the wealthiest countries in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't see why a government needs to pay interest on its debt when it's actually printing the money.
I don't either.
No, nobody's going to buy their debts nobody's going to buy their debt if there's no interest associated with it, because they know inflation is coming. So
But
when
you know, if you hit the 1% transaction tax, for example, it could be 0.1, the way I've heard it, you would, and there were no exemptions, that very soon would be generating so much income that would pay off all our debt.
yes,
So then we'd be debt free, and then
Yes.
after that, we never need to be in debt again to finance any infrastructure, because we're then heading into the positive, and all the money coming in is then reinvested to build highways, hospitals, schools, and all that. I mean, I'm not an economist, but it seems almost like a no-brainer to me.
but none of this is actually taking into account the royalties you could get from New Zealand's oil and gas.
Yeah.
So all of these transactions are predominantly financial transactions. They're not about goods, real goods in the real world. They're about mythical movements of money. And they make their money by tiny differences in exchange rates, tiny differences in interest rates, and so on. So it's basically smoke and mirrors. And once you get rid of the debt, and if you've got this, I would say a stable form of taxation that you could pay off your debt, and that you finance any future spending from the current income.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of the financial transaction tax, exactly what you said, Michael, because it's literally that tide rising all the boats. At the moment, you know, the government's just whipping everyone's income out from under them. You take that away and you would spark such a creative, positively productive country, that it would, everyone would benefit. So
yeah, and if you think about the costs to employers to take on some employees, you could reduce that dramatically, reduce the taxes on them, reduce the cost of doing businesses, you'll get more business doing. If you scrap corporation tax, you'll get a lot of companies relocating to New Zealand. And you know, allow people to take risks in their businesses, and you'll get businesses growing. The regulations at the moment are prohibiting innovation, are prohibiting people from taking risks, and the employment regulations are prohibiting and discouraging people from taking people on, discouraging companies from taking anybody on, particularly as they got rid of the probationary period. And if you start sticking in minimum wages, why would you employ, you know, a school leaver when you can get, you know, a graduate or somebody in their 30s for the same price? So it's all the law of unintended consequences. All these regulations, all these laws came in with good intentions, with the best of, well, we're going to help the workers. Well, what you did is you helped them into unemployment. Yeah, what could the banks are very powerful, and they're very cosseted, because many of the banks have got international backers. So this goes again in part with our idea of sovereignty. And one of the troubles, so there are many things that ordinary people don't understand. One of them is money, but the other one is sovereignty. And so again, those two go hand in hand. If you're taxed to death, you're not a sovereign individual. You're not really free, and particularly if the regulations, the laws are coming not from the New Zealand government, but from a body outside of New Zealand, like the United Nations or the WEF or the World Health Organization, wanting to jab us until we all die. So
I suppose the main thing, I would guess, holding this back, knowing New Zealanders' nature, the conservative, or you know, the perhaps risk adverse. So you could say to them, listen, this is what we'll do, but we need you to vote for us. But it almost seemed like too good to be true for them, and they'll stick to what they know, even though they're going into the bucket. So but maybe it could get to the point though where they're so desperate, they go, well, we've got nothing else to lose, let's back this. You just have to make sure you could explain it clearly get the message across so that the general public can understand it and think, we want this.
Well, it's a bit like the GST, and why do you have to pay a tax on everything you buy? Or capital gains tax. So capital gains tax, somebody pointed out, is actually a tax on inflation in many cases. Your property values have gone up. They haven't really gone up, they've just gone up with inflation. And so it's the price is higher, but your dollar is worth less. And again, people don't really understand that. And they can't understand, why it's $10 for a cabbage.
Mm. But the beauty also with financial tax, it's personal response or choice, because then you
Yes.
choose what you want to spend your money on, knowing there's going to be a 1% tax on it.
Yeah.
But there'll be no GST. And as opposed to, say, Chloe Swarbrick's wealth tax, where it's going to tax you, your house, your savings, everything that you have as an investment, your assets, on a yearly basis. It could be, who knows what it might be, 10%, 25%. It's actually taxing innovation and ambition and drive, whereas which will just drive more people overseas, the productive people anyway, the entrepreneurs. Maybe that's what she wants to do, but with the 1% transaction tax, as you said, you get rid of the corporate tax. You probably find that very quickly the outflow would suddenly turn around into a great inflow of quality people coming to New Zealanders and expats, that are going to want to, it works for them and it works for the country.
Well, I think the trouble we're facing in New Zealand is a lot of people in New Zealand don't want New Zealand to grow. They certainly don't want the cities bigger than they are, and they don't want the population bigger than it is. I've heard it time and time again. Why do we need economic growth? Why do we need to grow? It's just greed, isn't it? They really don't understand that this so-called greed is based on the basis of your pension and your lifestyle. So, there's a lot of middle class, particularly retired middle class people are all quite wealthy. And they think, well, we've got enough. I'm all right, Jack, keep your hands off my stack. So why do we need to pursue this growth? And it used to be the case that, yes, you need economic growth because you're having children. And so if you're going to grow your family, you're going to grow your society, you need to grow the economy to match it. But the push now is that the New Zealanders are not having enough babies. That's why they need to import people. And so throughout the Western world, it's this mass immigration coming in. And there's a lot of New Zealanders don't like that either. So I think the pitch is we're going to scrap all these taxes: income tax, GST, corporation tax. Why not? Why not get rid of it? If you can get this financial tax, transaction tax working, the bankers will scream. But employers should cheer. Anybody with a business should cheer. Shops, retail, restaurants, hotels, they should all cheer. Because all the government seems to do is introduce more and more taxes. So you've now got a bedroom tax, tourist tax. It never stops. The government seems to think, let's have another tax rather than, maybe we should cut down on what we spend.
Just like the councils.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to matter whether it's national or Labour, it's the same thing.
Same thing. I mean, the shocking thing is $45 billion on social security and welfare. That's insane. That's just not sustainable. You've got
for 5 million people.
For 5 million people, yeah. Because half of the population are taking out more from the system than they're putting in. So this idea that and you've got high income taxes, which makes it not worth my while working. So you're creating people in dependency and keeping them in dependent on the government. It's a good way of controlling them. But it's not a way to prosperity. It's the road to serfdom. And that's what we're doing. So no, I don't think the government should be printing money. And before government's printing, so it was largely a 20th century invention. Before that, you had private banks, you had a number of different companies. And before that, you had zero inflation. In fact, many things, because of technology, because of improvements in productivity, you had deflation. Things got cheaper. And in many aspects of modern life, lots and lots of things have got cheaper. So if you think of your car, you think of your computer, any electronics, your TVs, your stereos, everything has got cheaper except health and education. And who controls health and education?
The government.
The government. So anything that the government has a controlling stake in is just not efficient. So it's no reason that it's not a surprise that the health bill will keep going on up and up and up. It's free.
Yeah.
So when your health system is free, it's unlimited, the demand is going to go up and up and up. So there's something needs to be done in terms of limiting access to it and limiting how much individuals can actually get out of the system before they start putting into the system. I know we're supposed to protect the vulnerable and protect the sick and so on, but some people are just taking the piss. They're not working, not because they're ill, not because they're disabled, it's just because it's not worth their while. They can earn more on benefits than they can from a living, from a job. Anyway, I've talked enough. Any final comments, boys?
But one thing is about, the government allowing, from what we can see, this mass immigration, a lot of it from, you could consider third world countries, just to cover for their own inadequacies, because for all the people, productive people that have left the country for a brighter future overseas, greener pastures, and so they're allowing this all to happen to cover for their incompetencies.
It's a sweet little idea, taxing the banks to help the poor, but I don't think it'll work. It's very complicated and would be very tough on the banking sector.
Which has just been given billions of pounds of taxpayers' money to keep it going.
Well, yeah, of course.
And is still paying itself billions of pounds in bonuses.
Yes.
So the tax is a charge on all bank transactions that don't include members of the public. Bonds, derivatives, currency, speculative stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that. Very complex.
So the bankers would give how much from each deal they do? 25%?
Well, no, not that much.
10%?
No.
5%?
No, not 5.
More or less?
Slightly less.
What, 1%?
Not quite.
Half of 1%?
No.
0.1%?
No.
Half of that? They give around 0.05% of every deal?
Yeah, that's about right.
And sometimes it'd be even less. That doesn't sound like a lot to most people.
No. I can see that.
And how much would it raise to help people at home and abroad?
Oh, a fair amount, I believe.
About £1 million a year?
No, more than that.
£100 million?
More.
£500 million?
Well,
£1 billion a year?
no, it's slightly more than that, I'm told.
£10 billion?
More.
£50 billion?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
In fact, I believe it's likely to be more than £100 billion. Could be double that. Could be more than double.
Yeah, possibly.
Right. So let me get this clear. A tiny tax on the banks could raise billions of pounds every year to help save lives in the poorest countries, fund crucial action against climate change around the world, and help avoid cuts to crucial public services in this country.
Gosh. Well, yeah. That is about the, sum of it. I don't know. Perhaps it's, quite a good idea.
If I lay here, if I just lay here, would you lie with me and just forget the world?
What people are forgetting is how many billions the bank's got. after the global financial crash? And how much has that been paid back? All right, more fun. What's happening to Patty Maori?
Yeah. Well, what's going to be interesting with that, with the two MPs that have been expelled, because I would imagine their electorates will be quite loyal to them. Do they start up another party again? And the newest Te Pāti Māori MP, Irani, I can't remember her surname, she was quite sympathetic to those two, I think. So who knows, does she split and go with them and it's 3-3? And I did hear on the radio tonight that from on News Talk ZB, Barry Soper saying he knows that the Te Pāti Māori party are losing members in droves, he said.
Good.
Yeah. Personally, I don't agree with having race-based electorate seats at all.
No.
I see us all New Zealanders, all one people,
Yeah.
no division.
Yeah, it's a shame if they call a by-election, we still can't run anyone because they're all Maori seats.
Yeah.
How do you identify as Maori?
I think you actually have to have like ancestry. There's like a certain rule about it.
I
or
think some of
something.
our members do. Yeah, I've got, Maori ancestry. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you
Thank
to Hassan and Claire and Glenn. Shannon's gone.